Frank Harlan sat quietly in the corner booth of a small roadside diner off Route 86, a man who had seen more than he ever spoke about. His hands were steady, but his eyes carried the kind of weight only men who had served in war understood. He was a retired Navy SEAL, now living a quiet life in a town too small to ask questions. Most days, he came to the diner for the same thing, a burger, black coffee, and a few minutes of peace before heading back to his small motel room down the road. That peace ended the afternoon. 3 young men walked in. They were loud, entitled, and looking for someone to mock. Their leader, Jason Cole, was a kind of bully who thought money and arrogance made him untouchable. He was 24, good-looking in a cheap, cruel way, and always surrounded by a few followers who laughed at his every word. The waitress, Mara, looked uneasy the moment she saw them. Everyone in town knew Jason was trouble. Jason spotted Frank sitting alone and smirked. "Well, look at this," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Old soldier boy, huh? You saving the country one burger at a time." His friend snickered. Frank didn't respond. He'd learned long ago that silence was stronger than anger, but silence is also what bullies crave to break. Jason walked up, milkshake in hand, and leaned over the table. "You know what I think, old man," he said. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he dumped the entire milkshake over Frank's head. The diner gasped. The cold liquid dripped down Frank's face, soaking his shirt, pooling on the table. Mara cried out, "Jason, stop!" Jason just laughed. "Guess even heroes melt. Huh." Frank didn't say a word. He calmly stood, wiped his face with a napkin, placed a few bills beside his plate, and walked out. His boots made no sound as he left. No one dared to speak until the door closed behind him. Jason's laughter filled the space like poison. Outside, the world was quiet, except for the growing rumble of engines. The sound came from the highway, a deep, thunderous growl that made the windows shake. 8 motorcycles turned into the diner lot, all black and chrome, moving in perfect formation. On their jackets was a patch of a skull gripping a side between its teeth. Road Reapers MC. When the bikers entered, the air shifted. People went silent. At the front was Bear Maddox, the club's president, a man in his 40s, broad, calm, and built like a storm waiting to break. He'd served overseas himself once, in a different uniform but the same fight. Bear looked around the diner, eyes landing on the mess of milkshake and the trembling waitress. "What happened here?" he asked quietly. No one spoke until Mara whispered, "The man in the red cap." Jason turned around in his seat, half amused, half nervous. "What's it to you?" Bear's voice stayed low but dangerous. "That man you disrespected, he's a Navy SEAL. He's a reason punks like you get to sit here safe." Jason smirked. "What's your point, old man?" He walked away, didn't he? Bear took a step closer. "That's because he's got discipline, not weakness. There's a difference." Jason stood up, puffing his chest. "You think you can tell me what to do?" Bear looked at him without blinking. "No, but I can make you face what you did." Behind Bear, the rest of the Road Reapers stood silent. Men with names like Tank, Diesel, Hawk, and Wolf. The kind of men who didn't need to threaten anyone. Their presence did it for them. Bear nodded toward the door. "You're coming with us." Jason scoffed. "You can't make me." Tank stepped forward, his shadow covering Jason entirely. "Try me," he said. Jason hesitated, realizing too late that there were some people you just didn't test. He followed them out, glancing nervously at his friends, who stayed frozen in their seats. The Reapers didn't speak as they rode. They flanked Jason in silence, the roar of their Harleys the only sound on the long stretch of asphalt. They pulled up outside a small motel where Frank sat on the curb, wiping the mud off his old boots. He looked up, surprised to see them. Bear approached and said respectfully, "Sir, my name's Bear Maddox, Road Reapers MC. We heard what happened back there." Frank sighed. "Don't worry about it. It's done." Bear shook his head. "Not yet. You decide how this ends." He grabbed Jason by the arm and pushed him forward. "This the one?" Frank nodded once. "Yeah, that's him." Jason's voice cracked. "Look, man, I didn't mean." They silenced him with a look. "You don't get to talk. You listen." Then he turned to Frank again. "You're cool, sir. You want to walk away. We walk. You want him to understand what respect means. We'll handle it." Frank looked at Jason, who now stood small and shaking. "I'm not here to hurt anyone anymore," he said quietly. "But maybe it's time he learned something." Bay nodded. "Then he learns." They didn't touch Jason. They didn't threaten him. Instead, Bear handed him a bucket of water and a rag, and pointed toward an old motorcycle parked by the wall of Frank's room. "You're gonna clean that bike until it shines," he said. Jason frowned. "Seriously?" Bear's voice dropped. "You think respect a joke? Earn it." Jason got to work. Under the heat of the late afternoon sun, he scrubbed every inch of the motorcycle. The road reapers watched from their bikes, silent as statues. Frank sat nearby, saying nothing. The sound of the rag against metal filled the still air. 2 hours later, when Jason finished, his hands were raw and his clothes soaked with sweat. Frank stood and walked over. "You ever serve?" he asked quietly. Jason shook his head. "No, sir." "You ever bury someone you love because they gave everything for this country?" Jason swallowed hard. "No, sir." Frank's voice softened. "Then don't you ever disrespect the ones who did. Freedom costs blood you'll never have to pay." Jason's eyes filled. "I'm sorry." Frank nodded. "Don't say it. Show it." Bear stepped forward. "You want to make it right. You show up tomorrow at the diner. You work for free until she forgives you." Jason nodded again. "Yes, sir." And he did. The next morning, when Mara opened the diner, Jason was already outside. He worked all day, scrubbing tables, washing dishes, cleaning the floor. The town watched, surprised. The road reapers stopped by once, parked across the street, and watched from their bikes without saying a word. Frank came in a week later. Jason, head down, brought him a coffee and said quietly, "On the house, sir." Frank smiled for the first time in a long while. "Thank you, son." Across the road, Bear and his men watched the exchange. Wolf said, "You think he learned?" Bear nodded. "He did. Justice isn't always about fists. Sometimes it's about making a man face himself." The bikers mounted their Harleys, engines rumbling low. Frank lifted his coffee cup toward them in a silent salute. Bear returned the nod before leading the reapers down the road, the sound of their engines fading into the distance. The diner returned to its quiet rhythm, but the town would never forget what happened. They'd seen something rare, a different kind of justice. The kind that came from men who lived by a code, who didn't wear badges or suits but understood honor better than most. Frank finished his coffee and stepped outside, feeling the sun on his face. For the first time in years, the world didn't feel so heavy. because somewhere on that highway, 8 bikers have reminded everyone that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes, they ride Harleys and carry justice in their hearts. If you believe bikers can be heroes too, subscribe to the channel.